Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Courtney and it is Friday the 13th. So get ready for my top 5 slasher romances.
This blade, it's not a real blade, it's just like wall decoration, but I got it from Mad Monster, which is a local convention here in Arizona, and I got it signed by one of the guys that played Michael Myers in one of the Halloween movies, and I believe he also played Jason, and so I got the Michael Myers knife, but he also played Jason, and so like when he was signing it to me, he accidentally started writing Jason, and was like super apologetic about it, and like kind of tried to clean it off. I guess like he had these little like rags that could clean off the marker, and I told him to keep it like that because I just thought it was really funny that he had to cross out Jason and put the shape. So
I thought it was cool, and if you didn't know, my favorite slasher is Michael Myers, so that's why I have a bunch of like stuff dedicated to the Halloween movies. But anyways, it is Friday the 13th, which fell in October this year. When I found out that Friday the 13th was Friday the 13th was going to be in October this year, I was so happy, and I months ago started building this list for you guys. So as you can imagine, I've been reading a lot of slasher romance. I was calling it serial killer romance for a while, and I just thought that sounded kind of weird. It was kind of a mouthful. So I started calling it slasher romance, and I'm gonna give you 5 books that I deemed worthy of reading this Halloween season. Okay. So the first one that I have on my list, in no particular order, is called Vicious by A.J. Merlin. I've read one of her books before and I wasn't really into it. And then I saw that this one was out and I kind of thought it sounded more interesting. And the series that these books are a part of are not interconnected, so you can read any of them by themselves. You don't have to read them in order. So I decided to start like picking and choosing, and I found this one. And it is very clear that the killer in this book is kind of loosely inspired by Freddy Krueger, and I thought it was funny because I had just wrapped working on a Nightmare on Elm Street fan film. It is a book about a girl who has a traumatic past. She grew up in a foster family that was kind of abusive, and she's going to this therapist who kind of specializes in dream therapy. So he is her therapist, and he's helping her deal with a lot of like childhood trauma. And it kind of opens up with her entire foster family has been slaughtered. She kind of goes to her therapist kind of seeking, advice, and ends up finding out that he is the one that did it, thinking that he is going to help her through her issues, her emotional issues. So she is on the run. He stalks her through the United States as she's trying to find jobs as a social worker. And because of the way that she was brought up in a foster family, she kind of gravitates towards being a social worker or child protective service worker. She gravitates towards that work because of the way that she was brought up and the way that she was traumatized by her whole like situation. She wants to be better for other children in the future. So she finds a job as at some sort of a child protective service agency. It kind of leads her to finding that this town also has a killer. And so when she comes to this new town and she finds out about this other killer, I believe she kind of suspects that it's him at first, but then he shows up and he's like, no, it's not me. And they end up on kind of this little like investigation trying to figure out who the killer in this town is. While they're trying to catch this killer, obviously they have a lot of issues themselves because he's a creepy, very sexy, very smart serial killer stalker who is obsessed with her. And she is trying to deny the fact that she is also attracted to him, even though he slaughtered her entire foster family and is a serial killer. The next book that I have on my list quite possibly could be one of my favorite books of all time, simply because it made me laugh my ass off so much. And it's weird to say this about a slasher romance because it was definitely gory. It was very, very gory. There were some very uncomfortable spots in the book where I was like, because I'm very visual, they say there's 2 kinds of readers. There's readers who read the words and they say the words in their head as they're reading, and then there's people who visualize it like it's a movie. I am the person who visualizes things like a movie. So gory stuff is definitely very visual to me when I'm reading, which is not a problem because I am into horror movies and all that. But it was just funny because this book is such a mix of comedy and gore and horror that I don't know, it was amazing. And that book is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynn Weaver. This is the first book I've ever read of hers. I also have Marrow on my list, which was written by her and Trisha Wolfe, who is another really good serial killer romance writer. And this book is about two, I wouldn't say rival serial killers. It starts out where she is trapped in a cage that she has been in for a while because she killed a serial killer. These two are killers of bad people, by the way. Kind of Dexter-ish. So they hunt down serial killers or bad people. In the very beginning of the book, it begins with her having killed this serial killer. But in the process, he had kicked her into one of his cages and she got locked in. And then another serial killer, Mr. Butcher Man, who had also been tracking this man, shows up and finds her in the cage. Turns out he's a huge fan of hers, as serial killers are, I guess, and frees her. And then they have lunch together. He ends up having a super, super big crush on her. And because of that, he decides to propose a competition where annually these two will get together, hunt down the same serial killer, and whoever gets them first wins. And during these years of competition, they stay in touch with each other. They're texting, they're becoming friendly, they're becoming frenemies technically because they're competitive, but also they're very attracted to each other. And over the years, they start building this very twisted and very odd and weirdly sweet relationship. And it's kind of, the book is about this whole story about, you know, their backgrounds, how they became the way they are, their relationship as it evolves, and it was just hilarious. It was hilarious and gory and disgusting and spicy, and I would recommend this to a lot of people. Even if they're not into the genre, I feel like I would just recommend this for the sheer entertainment. The next book that I have on my list is Bleed Me an Ocean by Kyra Knight. And this book, I don't even know how I found this book, to be honest. I say that a lot about a lot of books because sometimes I'll just be kind of surfing through Kindle and just see a book that has an interesting cover or an interesting title and I'll just read it. And that's kind of what happened with this book. It is a fairly new book and underrated, I would say, in my opinion. It read very well, like it was a really fun read. It was a slow burn, so I'm technically recommending this as like a beginner book for people that want to get into the slasher genre but don't really like want to get straight into the deep end. This book it had Scream vibes. It is a college setting, and it's the Scream vibe comes from the fact that there is a killer on the loose. And our main character is kind of becoming surrounded by the victims of this killer, very much like in Scream. I would say that the murder part of it and the slasher part of it is almost secondary, only because it happens in the background of this main character and her new relationship with her best friend's cousin. I hope that wasn't like confusing. It was almost confusing for me to say it. But anyways, it's very much about their relationship as college students and living a normal life. I say normal because people are being murdered all over the place in this town. And it's about their very, very steamy, very sexy relationship while, you know, people are trying to find out who this killer is. The reason I enjoyed this book so much is because, one, it was just like, it was a nice, like, spicy, steamy ride, but with like the killer portion of it in the background. But then it really, really picks up towards the end. And I have to say that the twists in this book like were really good and like unexpected. And again, it's more of a beginner slasher romance just because it's not as gory as a lot of other ones. But I really enjoyed it, and I didn't see a lot of things coming that happened in this book, and I would absolutely recommend it to people who decide to dip their toe into the slasher romance genre. The next book that I have on my list, I'm actually in the process of reading the second book because this is a very short book. I didn't know that it was connected to the next book. I almost thought it was just like standalones, but it's not. It left off on a very heavy cliffhanger. And that is The Risk by S.T. Abbey, and it is the first in the Mindfuck series. And this book reminds me of an episode of Criminal Minds. So it is about a behavioral analysis. I am a huge fan of Criminal Minds, so that's all I thought about when I was reading this. It is about a man in the FBI who is investigating multiple murders, not all by the same people. And then you have this woman, and he's a behavioral analyst or whatever, so he can read people. If you haven't seen Criminal Minds, it's very much like they can read people's body language, their mannerisms, the way they say things, the reason they say things. And it's kind of how they catch killers, is they analyze their behavior and the motives behind some of the things that they do so they can predict what they might do next. But anyways, we have this woman who also studied behavioral analysis because, but for very different reasons. She is a survivor of something very, very brutal, and it doesn't reveal what that is until kind of the end of the book, but she is a survivor of something very, very awful and very brutal where she should have died. And she is in the process after, I think it's like 10 years later or something. She has built herself up past the trauma to be basically a really good killer of killers. And she has a list of people who wronged her. And she is moving down that list very meticulously. And she befriends this FBI agent that she sees in like a coffee shop or something. And they kind of go toe to toe with their behavioral like analysis. They analyze each other and they find out they're kind of like on the same level in reading each other. But because she is on the same level as him in reading people, she can also hide a lot of her emotions and her intentions. So he's having a really difficult time reading her. So he has no idea what she does, you know, when she's not hanging out in coffee shops or working a regular job. And so they like start up this really, really sweet relationship, but she's also murdering people at night. And she's doing it very well. And so the second book leaves off on a cliffhanger because, like, obviously you have an FBI agent who chases down serial killers and you have a girl who is a serial killer. And it's very tense, and I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoy characters like her because she went through a very significant trauma and was able to completely transform herself and hunt down the people who did it to her. So I just really like her character, and I really feel for his character because he's a very stressed man, you know? Again, if you watch Criminal Minds, they don't really have personal lives because they commit a lot of their time to catching serial killers. But I just really like the relationship. I really want to know where it goes. I'm like in the middle of book 2 and I'm very interested to know what happens between them. And the last book on my list is Lovely Bad Things by Trisha Wolfe, and it is the first in the Hollows Row series. This was the first book that I read that is of this genre, of this like slasher, serial killer, murder genre. And I loved it. I loved it. It was, so it's not like Butcher and Blackbird is two rival serial killers. That is very straightforward to me. This book is about a woman. I don't think she's not like official. I don't really recall what her job was, but it's not somebody that would be like an official investigator of a crime scene. But she does know how to analyze crime scenes. So she is called in to analyze a crime scene that is very disgusting and brutal. And is basically in the bayou where this serial killer had dumped a bunch of body parts. No, not technically body parts. He sews eyeballs with very, very, very neatly, and he has fastened them to a tree. And there's a lot of symbolism around why he's doing this, and everybody knows it. They just don't know what it is and why he's doing it. So she is called in to try and figure that out. And she starts understanding there's a lot of like cult-ishness that like kind of goes with this murder. So she goes to this like this place for the criminally insane to ask the authorities to not free, but kind of let her take one of these criminally insane men that she put away. And she wants to take him to this murder scene so that he can help her figure it out, because he is a genius, especially when it comes to cult activity. But they kind of like haunt each other. Like it's hard to go into like when I'm telling you, but if you read the book, the way they bounce off each other and the way they feed into certain parts of each other and the way they view each other, because it is multiple perspectives. So you get his perspective and you get her perspective. But anyway, so she gets this psychopath from this asylum to help her figure out who the killer is and why and when he's going to strike next. In order to do that, she really has to put herself in this really scary headspace, which he helps her do. And I think that's why it was so creepy, like their relationship, because she has to start thinking very outside the box. And he is very eager to get her to kind of enter that darkness. And there is another book, obviously, and it is connected to the first. And I am absolutely going to be reading it after I get through my huge TBR that I have this month. And I would absolutely recommend that for anybody that is, you know, trying to delve into the darker side of romance. Absolutely. I had trouble categorizing this because I do want to do a dark romance book at some point this month. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to put this on this list or if I wanted to put it on the dark romance list. Eventually I decided to put it on the serial killer or slasher romance list because technically she is investigating a serial killer, but also getting the hots for a serial killer. So I decided to put it on this list, and I have another list that has all different dark romance books for next week or whatever. Anyways, that was my list for the top 5 slasher romances for this day, Friday the 13th in October. I would love to do another Friday the 13th list for you guys at some point in the future, but I don't know when the next Friday the 13th is. Until then, I hope you guys check out some of these books. I hope you enjoy them. Tell me what you think in the comments if you do. If you have any other slasher romance books that you want to recommend, put those in the comments as well. Follow me, like this video. It really helps me out. I'm trying to get to the 500 mark on YouTube here, and I am very nearly there. So if you could share this video, tell people about it, let me know if you're reading any of these books, that would be awesome. I am super excited about all the other things that I have planned for this month. But until then, I hope you are all having a wonderful October, and I will see you all next time. Bye!